Welcome back to Beacon Light. So last time we talked about a simple composition. We had very few moving parts. It was very stark, very simple. This time I'm going to move on to talking about a much more complex sort of a composition. And sorry to anybody who was hoping to get me talking about the cliff jump painting. I will get to that, just not yet. That's a bit of a special edition kind of a thing. So what is this? This is an illustration of a conversation in the Murderbot Discord. And now the Murderbot Diaries are the series of novellas and then a recent novel by Martha Wells. They're really good. Check them out. Anyway, my role in the Discord is mostly people start talking about something and then I go, but what if that was art? And then I do it. So this is me doing that with a conversation about, hey, what if the title character, what if Murderbot was a werewolf? And I just leaped off that and just went for it. And I was essentially going for this very gothic but very high-tech vibe. I wanted it to be steampunk-ish, but with Arcana tech substituted for steam. So I'm ripping really heavily off the look and feel of Van Helsing, which is a great film, if completely bonkers, but that's why it's great. And Blades in the Dark, the tabletop game, because that has a really great, really strong aesthetic. So I'm doing this AU, alternate universe version of the opening scene of the first novella, which I have actually illustrated before. And that means that I needed a big monster, so here is a dragon. We're still on really harsh black work here. But it is spiced up with some color with the fire tones and the blue lightning. But it is still essentially, it's a monochrome painting. Sometimes I think, oh, I rely a bit much on black. But on the other hand, it's a great time and stress saver, and it does invariably turn out really eye-catching. We've seen it before, we've seen it here, we're going to see it again. My use of black does look cool. The point here is, what I'm going for with it is the suggestion. If I tried to paint this whole scene in detail, if I had tried to paint every brushstroke of Murderbot, if I tried to get the contours right, and especially on the dragon's face, I'd be at it for days, and, like, worse than that, I'd have to get everything perfectly right, and I wouldn't. So we'd end up in the sort of either that's bad or uncanny valley territory. But doing it like this, I can just make the suggestion of a scene, and the audience's minds can fill in the rest of the detail, just from, rim light and the bits of lighting that we've got here. And it actually looks better. To be honest, I didn't want to draw all the architectural details on these windows. I hate drawing architecture. I don't like it. So this was a lot more sort of fun for me. But a key part of why it works is that there is a great deal of anatomical, compositional, and pose-related skill going into creating really solid sketch work. Because I can afford to obscure details I don't need if I've got all these really strong detailing in the sketch. But anyway, so this is a lot busier than the really stark gothic western vibe that we saw in the gun illustration. It's got a lot of visual clutter, it's got these ropes, it's got the various characters, and of course the lightning bolts on Murderbot's spine. And I'm illustrating a scene here rather than creating a sort of summation title card. So I need to consider what's the action. I need to consider several characters, and I need to consider that I am also drawing this to illustrate an alternate universe, so I want to be illustrating what exactly Murderbot is in that context. So, what am I drawing? I am drawing Murderbot, a techno-werewolf, swinging into decisive action to protect the humans around it. That is the what. And as we heard from the last video, the what is really important. So how did I go about it? I didn't thumbnail it. This is a case where I thought about it, I thought hard, and then I just started sketching. Now, we're seeing here, this is actually 2 sketch layers, I would have started out with Murderbot, just the sketch here, and tried to get that really strong line of action through the body, as well as a strong line of action between the dragon's eye level and the claw. But I would have just started out with the main character. These two here, Valesu and Mensa, they came later. Notice that Murderbot's body is roughly at the 1/3 line, and that its eye is about halfway, and that the dragon's eye, once we draw that in, will also be about on the thirds. Now, rule of thirds is a key compositional technique. So basically the idea with rule of thirds, and I've slightly breached it here because I've done a lot of half here. I've put Murderbot and the dragon roughly at the halfway mark. But the idea is you want to place your most key elements, your focal points, on and around the third lines to get that more sort of pleasing arrangement of elements. It creates asymmetric elements, basically, because symmetry, centeredness, and balance can look quite static very easily, whereas asymmetry helps with dynamism, and when I'm doing this, I really need dynamism. This is an action moment. We have people doing stuff. Everything, it's all go. This is a really dramatic moment. So I've been very careful to get this pose at Murderbot's head very dramatic. We've got this dramatic curve of the claw. And then eventually I will have come to putting the people on. They would have come after the dragon. The dragon's on sketch layer 2. And it starts getting interesting here because what we've got here, and I did try a lot of different versions to get here, is we've got the curve of the wing is framing Murderbot, and the claw here is pointing towards it. It's a big flashing arrow saying, hey, the werewolf, that's important. And I futzed a lot with the dragon pose, and I would have been doing this simultaneously alongside working on this baseline sketch of Murderbot on layer 1. There were more dramatic ones, but they would have been a lot harder, and this one allowed me to do the windows. And I'm definitely, by this point, already planning out the color. I know that we're going to have fire in the mouth, and I know that we're going to have lightning here. So knowing that, and knowing roughly what elements I want, I'm now looking at the windows sketch, which we can see here. I'm just going to quickly get rid of all this graffiti. There we go. These windows were made with the symmetry tool. Interestingly, we can see another thirds arrangement going on here. It's the middle of this window. That was wholly unintentional. But what I did here, I would have done one version in the symmetry tool, so I would have had a line of symmetry going exactly where this third line is, and just filled that in. And then duplicated it a bunch and used the perspective tool, which is in the transform menu, to make it be in perspective as it is here. And at this point, I'm thinking about things like, I have made damn sure that Murderbot's claw is in an area of moonlight. I have made very sure that Mensa is going to be in front of the window section. And we've also got this place where Volasu's head sort of interacts with the window and changes the shape of it. So having done these baseline sketches, again, let's get rid of some graffiti. I'm now doing a lot more sophisticated sketch work. So here we can see that we have the dragon's facial structure is being explored, and we can see now that the eye line is also roughly on the third mark of the dragon. I've got quite a detailed sketch of all the characters. We've got designs for, again, very steampunk designs, and very much, it's quite loose. I didn't work too hard on the designs for the humans, but it is very much a steampunk kind of an idea. But I'm also doing a lot of very hard work on what Murderbot looks like as a techno-werewolf. We can see that I'm being very careful to preserve and enhance that dynamic pose. If we compare the original It's very, very similar. And I've also ensured that we can see Murderbot's teeth here. That was important to me. And I'm trying to make sure that the augments work with the body rather than against, hence why they go down the spine. We have these lines on the face, even though, I mean, does that really work in contextually? Doesn't matter. It looks cool. And these various other augments as well as the ones down the spine. And we introduce these ropes here. So we want ropes in order to get some more visual interest, because that would be quite a blank zone, even with the windows, if I didn't have them there. But I mean, this is Gothic and it's quite maximalist. I'm not trying for a minimalist composition here. It's easy enough. Right, so I will have got to this point in the sketches, and I don't actually remember the order in which I did next. But it will have been black work. So let's start looking at the black work. And a lot of that will now have painting on it, so you'll just have to pretend it doesn't. So I would have changed the canvas to dark grey. Let's get rid of the graffiti again. I don't think it would have been this dark, actually, originally, just so that I could see. Because I think the first thing I would have done is put the windows in. They're very, very faint here. And at this point, I am only using black. I'm using the basic G pen, exactly what I'm using for these annotations, and just making the silhouette. And then after this, we're doing the dragon sort of near view, I assume, because this is the stuff that's nearest the camera. And then behind that, we put the other side of the mouth, and this would originally just have been black. But this is on a new layer so that I can do this intense fire in its mouth. And the ropes are on this layer because why not? I don't want to have too many layers. They're not interacting in any way with the mouth. It'll be fine. And next I do the semi-transparent membranous bits, which you can just about see here. I don't think I did a great job on these, but it doesn't really matter. And then after that, we get our figures. And originally I would have put all the figures on the same layer, but Mensah needed to be underneath these, needed to be underneath the scales on the dragon. So she ended up down on this layer. So we've got her here, and then we've got Volasu and Murderbot on this layer here. Again, this is originally just black. We're currently seeing the edge light, the rim lighting here, but originally it would just have been black, and I would have had the shapes, which means that I can now look at the background, and I can place the moon. The moon. And what I've done with the moon is I've got one circle, and I've got one glow dodge gradient. The glow dodge layer, it lights up the sky, so now we can actually see Mensah and Volasu silhouetted against it. And then there's a slight transparency to the moon, which draws the eye to the center of it, where this area of really bright contrast sits around Murderbot's face. And let's get rid of the sketch layers so that we can see things more clearly. And the next thing I would have done is painting the moonlight in. So we can see how this has gone. We can see all the moonlight on the figures. That would have been with the default gouache brush. Please don't nitpick my pronunciation of gouache, but it's that and the thin gouache brush are probably my favorite brushes for painting in Clip Studio. I use the gouache for the cliff dive painting. The thin gouache, I think, might be what I used for this, actually. And then I would have done the fire. Mostly it's just in the dragon's mouth, but we've also got some shading on Murderbot's actual figure. It helps define its form. It's just a little bit eye-catching. With the black work, it's very useful to have multiple light sources to define the form. And it also grabs the eye. Most of this picture is monochrome, so once you get something in color, you're thinking, oh, wow, okay, that's different. Which is one of the reasons why the humans are just in black and white. They're not the focal points of the scene. They're visible, and I've made sure that they're visible, they're notable, they matter, but they're not popping out of the composition. We're leaving absolutely no doubt about who the protagonist is here, because we're putting something else in colour, and that is Murderbot's augments. So the first layer is just simple lines. They're in turquoise because turquoise is cool. It evokes lightning, and also it's the opposite to fire colors on the color wheel. So if we take this, see, we end up in turquoise. And that sets up the opposition. It sets up the sort of enmity of opposition. We'll go with opposition between this monster and this protector. And now I've duplicated the layer and I've made it glow, so this is a little bit brighter now. Let's zoom in a bit so that we can see. And then I've used 3 different glow layers to get this sort of, get the lightning crackling off it. So here's one where I've used Gaussian blur to get a backdrop. Here's one where I've used the airbrush tool to just enhance. And then here on top is the actual layer of the lightning where you've got the actual lines. And these are a mix of glow dodge and add glow layers. They do slightly different things. You kind of have to experiment. And then last but not least, in terms of the lightning, we're bouncing some color off the dragon's scales. Because just as the fire is reflected on Murderbot, we're reflecting Murderbot's lightning off the dragon. And it looks good now. Like this is cool. This looks great. But it's missing a little bit of je ne sais quoi. So first of all, I put in some clouds, and these, again, they clutter up the composition in an interesting way, because you don't always want it to be very simple, and they allow us to sort of interrupt areas that are a little bit boring as well. And this is a different brush. This isn't gouache. I picked this up in the App Store. It's thicker the better, and it works pretty great for clouds. I used it for gun as well. And I've locked the layer's transparency in order to put the moonlight on. So these would originally have been dark grey, and then I've just put a light grey to white on the bottom of them to get this bit. Which means, and I've carefully preserved this area of focus, around Murderbot's face and claw. It's very, very deliberate. We're making sure that that is the focal point, because it is. That's the bit that is the most important. We're also de-emphasizing a little bit the curve of the leg and paw, just so that nobody gets confused and thinks that that is the focal point, because it isn't. We're focusing eyes very much onto the face and the claw. So now it's effects time, because I can't do anything without effects. I've got a tone curve layer added here, and this sort of makes it pop a bit. It boosts the moon, and then I use a noise layer to just create a subtle bit of interest so that it's not flat. And I'm done. The reason I use noise layers and other texture layers is it can obscure quite a lot of sloppiness as well. I'm not a very precise painter. I like to suggest so the noise can kind of smooth over a reasonable amount of eccentricity in that. But there we are. That is this painting. It's a ferocious little scene. I paired it with a ficlet for publication, and it's gone down quite well. It's a fun AU. So that's a bit of a deep dive into how I have created a complex composition. We've run a little bit longer than usual this time, but that's okay. So yeah, next episode is going to be a little bit different, so look forward to that. And I hope all of your projects are going wonderfully and that you're taking care of yourself and so on. Farewell.